Okay, we are back to Mishlei. We're up to 17:9, and we have a skeleton crew here. So far, there are only three other people, not our usual crowd. We'll see if other people show up. Also, a disclaimer, I had another bad bout of insomnia last night. I got about 4 hours. So if I decide to abruptly end the shiur, it means I just ran out of steam. Or if I make a stupid mistake, call me out on it. You should do any of that anyway, but I could just be having you know, a moment. Okay. Mechase pesha mavakesh ahava v'shone b'davar mafrid aluf. So I wrote this in the sheer announcement, which is that the pasuk is kind of a cryptic pasuk, uh, and I think what is going to make it a little interesting is that I think there are a lot of different scenarios we could say that this applies to. So we'll see where we go with it. Looks like Isaiah got on, and he is usually the one who volunteers to translate. So, Isaiah, if you want to step up to the plate, you may try translating here.
Sure, let's see.
Second half is very difficult, but
So one who covers up an iniquity,
hold on.
transgression,
Yeah, sorry, hold on a second. One who covers up a yeah, transgression is good. Transgression.
is one who requests love, seeks
Yeah,
love.
so I believe that in biblical Hebrew, then mavakesh is not to request but to seek. It could be to request also, but I think to seek is the more common one. So seeks love, okay, or is one who seeks love. I'll put is one who seeks love. Is one who seeks love. Okay, v'shone badavar.
Um, and one who teaches a thing.
Okay,
Oh,
so that's possibly one thing, or one translation. I think that's gonna be the third. Let's see, Shoned. I think that's gonna be the third translation. Teaches. There's
or
two primary.
changes.
Yeah, changes is one, and then Shoned like the word Mishnah or Vishnian Tam Levanecha, if it doesn't
Oh,
mean.
repeats,
Yeah,
repeats.
repeats or teaches. Oops, sorry, Davar.
A thing.
Yeah, okay, a Davar, which is a thing, or
Or about a thing, maybe.
well, let's say
A
another
davar,
translation, than other than thing for Davar or Davarim.
word,
Yeah, word or statement. Okay. Mafrid aluf. So mafrid,
separates.
yep, separates, and then aluf, there's two translations.
Like a teeth.
Yeah, so that's the most recent one we had in the Parsha. A chief, or anyone know the other one? Is a friend. Okay. Maybe there's a better word than friend, but I think that's a good translation. All right, so let's go over in the our minimalist translations here. So in the BDB, we've got Pesha as a transgression. Are there other? Yeah, okay. Transgression, punishment, offense, punishment. Yeah, I find. Let's say transgression. That's fine. Okay. Actually, I also like the word offense. A pesha, which is transgression slash offense. Okay, I'm just gonna say seeks love. Okay. Um, Shana is to change or to alter or to repeat or to do again. Okay. Interesting. It does not say, does it say teach anywhere? No. I mean, we do use it for teach, but it might be that teach is just a another variant on repeat, which is why um I chose to put teach last. Okay. Parad is to divide, so separate, as you said. Divide, separate, be divided or separate, make a separation. Okay, and then aloof is, I don't know why they say tame as the first translation, but a friend or an intimate is I think there's I thought it said it in Megillus Rus. Maybe not. Or a chief or what's a chiliarch? Chiliarch? Never heard of that. Okay. Fine. Okay, so I think we covered all the translations here so far. Okay, so now let's look at our minimalist other minimalist meforshim. So Mitzudas ציון says Vishona is milashon shenis. So Mitzudas ציון says shone equals repeat. Okay, means like twice. And then aluf is sar umoshel, a chief or ruler. Okay. Sadia Gaon. Now, I people in my Monday night, no, not my Monday, my shiur in yeshiva, my morning Mishlei shiur, we'll see that I've started to incorporate another minimalist commentator into the mix here. So the way this works is Sadigon translated the Tanakh into Judeo-Arabic, and that's called the Tafsir. And since we don't speak Judeo-Arabic, we're reliant on people who know Hebrew and Judeo-Arabic to translate it back into Hebrew to show the nuances. So the one we usually use is Rav Kafech, who is a major Judeo-Arabic translator. But then we have the another Yemenite Rav, whose name I love, Rav Amram Korach, who has another set of notes on Sadigon. Okay, so both of them together we're going to call Sadigon. Okay, just they might have differences. So Shoneh, he says, is Hachozer al Hadvarim Mafrid Ha'alufim, one who repeats. Actually, you'll see Art Scroll says one who harps on the matter. Okay, so I'm going to say harps on something. I think that conveys the implication on something on matters. Mafrid Ha'alufim. And then see they say alienates. I think that's good. Alienates friends. Okay. And then the Rav Amram Korach clarifies that aluf is from the Judeo-Arabic word al-alfa, which is hacherav ha'iskarvus, which is friendship. Okay, so he translates as friendship rather than friends. Okay. The Targum translates the first half the same, but then the second half he says udashane milsa, one who repeats a matter. Mefarik Rachama. Now, I don't know if this is the only translation here, but I looked up Rachama in the Jastro, and it's unclear to me the way it's vocalized, whether it means friend or love, but Mefarik is to break, okay? Breaks a friend or breaks, I guess, friendship or a friend. I'm not sure which one it is, okay? But the key part here is breaks, okay? That's different than mafrid. So in other words, there's probably a fancy grammatical way to say this, but we say separates as in like separating between two people, but I think he's taking it separate as in like cleaves, like cuts apart. Okay, like breaks the two apart, maybe. Okay, Art Scroll says one who covers an offense seeks love, but one who harps on a matter alienates a ruler from himself. I don't know why they add from himself. Rav Hirsch says he who covers up a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a word separates the most esteemed friend. I don't know how he gets the most esteemed friend. I don't know if he's just picking up on the fact that this is a weird word for friend, aluf, or maybe he's relating to the word aleph, like which is, by the way, the relationship of chief to the word to the root here is aleph, like the first letter of the alphabet. So I don't know if like aluf is like your best friend, maybe like your number one friend. And then Alter says, who overlooks fault seeks love, and who repeats a speech, very weird, drives off a friend. Yeah, I'm not sure how he gets speech as a davar. And then our YouTube friend Peskin says, he who conceals an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates best friends. All right, so he also is learning it as best friends. Okay, so let me import all of this into the chat for consideration, because I think we should keep all the options on the table. So let's do that first. There's one. Okay, then we've got our minimalist commentators. That's 2. And then we've got our translations. That's 3. Okay, and then we have our questions. Okay, so what are the questions and problems? Yeah, Alex.
What exactly is like the decision-making scenario in this?
Yes, that's going to be a key question. What is the decision-making scenario in this here? And I also want to say, like, I'm going to put this in parentheses. Does this, I guess, okay, I'm going to say, okay, is this proactive or reactive? And I don't usually ask that, but it sounds like, I don't know, when it says one who covers up an offense seeks love, I don't know if that means like someone offended you and then in response you cover it up, or someone committed an offense and you cover that up, or if it just means your general policy is you conceal or cover up offenses, whatever that is. That's what I mean by reactive versus proactive. Yeah. I don't know if that's the best way to ask it, but that's what I'm saying here. Okay, Ariel.
Yeah, what does cover up mean here?
Yeah.
And
What does
also
it
like
mean to cover up?
Yeah, it
Uh,
also seems like covering up in general, like if you're covering up like a transgression, it sounds like a negative thing, not a positive
yeah.
thing.
Okay. Moreover, I'm going to put this as a separate question. Isn't covering up a transgression usually a negative thing? Or at least something, sorry, at least something that has consequences. Okay. Mishlei is not really into lying and covering stuff up because usually the stuff, does not, continue to remain covered up. So even if it's not for a bad reason, like you could be covering up something good, but it's going to get out. So it's a risky business. Um, yeah, actually, I'll put that in the same question. Okay, Isaiah?
Um, I had a better question before, but I forgot it. So my other question is this the positive or negative thing that the person's
Oh,
doing,
that's good.
the
Right.
cover, the
Okay.
covering up?
Yeah. Is the first half the good decision, or is it a negative decision? Is it a bad decision? Yeah. Sounds like the second half is bad, right? So, um, so I'm gonna say, are both halves bad?
But that's what tripped me up because I assumed the first
Yeah.
half was bad at first, but then it was like, oh, the second
Yeah,
half
right.
also seems bad.
Right, right. Yeah, but then the second half sounds bad. So, yeah, and it is possible to have two pasuk with both bad halves. Yeah, Alex.
Two kind of interrelated questions.
Yeah.
One, are these two clauses related in that, like, is it the same person doing the same thing, or are
Okay.
these different scenarios completely? And
How
then,
are the two, let me say, how are the
yeah.
two halves related within the decision-making scenario? Okay, for example, are we talking about the same friend? Um, yeah, go ahead.
And then also, I'm curious why there isn't any like Mishleic archetype attributed to this. Like, what
Yeah,
can we gain from it being kind of
right. Is
not
there
characterized
any
in the ways things
significance,
normally are?
right? Is there any significance to the lack of references to Mishlaic archetypes? Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Avital and Yeti.
Yeah, two questions. Number one, however we define the word aloof, I think there is something to ask there, meaning if we define it as a friend, so aloof is like, why not chaver? Why the more uncommon version of aloof? And second of all, if we define it as a chief or someone in power, then just the second clause is very strange. Like, a result of your actions, you're separating yourself from someone in power. Like,
Yeah.
are we referring to the other person as someone in power?
Right. Okay. So if it's a friend, why the weird term? And then if it's a ruler, so I guess what's the consequence? Right. In other words, there's a clear consequence in separating a friend. That's something you don't want to do. But separating a ruler, like it doesn't really spell out. So what?
Right. And the second question, I'm not sure if it's the same or a little bit different than Alex's question, but the shoneh b'davar, I think, can either be the person who is mechaseh pasha, meaning he's being mechaseh again, or it could be the person who actually did the transgression is doing the transgression for the second time.
Okay, that's a good question also. So likewise, um, uh, let's say if shone means repeat, who is doing the repeating? Is the concealer concealing again? Sorry, concealing again, or is the offender repeating the offense?
All right.
Yeah, good. Racheli.
For number three, just to like say a little more, like the language of seeks love is very interesting because if you say, let's say someone seeks peace, it generally sounds positive, but I feel like in this case, it could be read as like they're seeking love from like a people-pleasing kind of tendency or like
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's ask that as its own question because I think that just needs to be defined in general, which is what is the meaning and connotation of seeking love? Is this a purely good thing, like seeking peace and love between all people, or is this a like an unhealthy kind of seeking love, like people pleasing? Yeah, that's good. Isaiah?
Yeah, how definitively is this pasuk talking? Is it saying this is always true, or is it only sometimes true?
Right. Okay, so to what extent is this pasuk true? Always, most of the time, sometimes, or in corner cases. Yeah. Ariel?
Yeah, what how are we defining pesha in this
Yeah, good. I was waiting for someone to ask that. What does pesha mean in this context? Is this let's say a sin, let's say in halacha, an interpersonal crime, a personal blemish, a personal offense, something else? Yeah. Okay. I feel like if we have to ask about shona, right? So let's see here. So if shona means repeat, what makes the second time different from the first time, right? Because presumably the first time you're not being mafri aloof. And then if it means change, what are you changing? What are you changing? I'm going to go ahead, just Isaiah, since no one in the translation said it means teach. I didn't look at all the meforshim, but no one in the translation said it means teach, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that it does not mean teach here. I'm pretty sure that in general, the reason why we say teach is because we're used to seeing it in the context of Vishina Tam Levanacha, and that is from repeat. Like you should like drill it into them, or we associate with Mishnah, but that has to do with Torah pen, repeating it. So I think we'll treat it as a change repeat for now. Yeah, Racheli?
This is kind of specific, but I'm wondering if you can translate the bedavar as about the thing.
Let's see. One who repeats a thing or about a thing. Yeah. I'm just trying to think how I can incorporate this into here. Repeats a davar, let's say about. Let's go to brackets like that. Okay, that'll acknowledge that. Yeah. Did I ask what shona bedavar means? I'll just tack that onto here also. And well, actually, let's say what is the davar? What is the davar in this context? And what does it mean to be shone badavar? Yeah, in fact, I feel like uh something just went off in my head for a second. I feel like, did we see one where it used the word shone to mean like to be like duplicitous in your speech? Was that us? Let's see. All right, maybe I'm thinking of another Mishlei pasuk. I don't know. Yeah. Ariel?
Yeah. What would it mean to expose a pesha?
Okay, yeah. So what does it mean to cover up? And then I'll say, likewise, what is the opposite? What would it look like to expose or reveal or not conceal a pesha? That's a great question. Yeah, Avital and Yeti.
I'm wondering if for this pasuk to quote unquote work, does there need to be a specific kavana or intent, or it happens automatically?
Okay, that's a good question.
Mechasa pesha by definition mevakesh ava, or is there a certain type of mechasa pesha or an intent behind it that makes it a mevakesh ava?
Okay.
And same thing for the second half.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask that on all of them. Okay, with like you did with regards to all of the actions in this pasuk. Um, uh, are these I guess what's the word, propositions about them only true if if they're accompanied by a specific intent, or are they inherent in the action? Yeah. Okay. I think the only thing we have not asked about is mafreed. So let's say here, what is the definition and connotation of separate? Is it does it mean alienate, i.e., causing them to separate from you, or is it like the Targum, meaning that you're breaking the friend or friendship, or something else? Yeah, again, that's also just a weird word. I feel like there's a problem, by the way. There's probably a fancy word for this, but I feel like since there's a cognate, I think is what it's called, since the word aloof in English means something, I think it's hard for English speakers to think about this without having the vibe of aloofness in your mind. So like I don't know if you're picturing this, but like I'm picturing the friends are just like kind of like not caring, but I gotta like get that out of my mind because that's not actually what it's saying. Okay, so yeah, okay, there you go. All right, I have at least one more person. All right, so I'm going to repaste the translation in the chat, and let me start putting all these questions. So as you can see, there's a lot here. And what we really need to do, oops, sorry, what we really need to do. Oh, there's one more question we didn't ask. Is this intended to be a standalone pasuk, or is this connected to the previous pasuk, which we did 2 weeks ago, about bribing? Okay, that was the pasuk we did last time was Evan chen hashocha beinu ba'alav el kol asher yifnei yaskil. A bribe is a charming gem in the eyes of its owner. Wherever he turns, he will succeed. There are meforshim, excuse me, that even though I didn't learn through them, I did skim them, and they do seem to. A lot of them seem to say that it's connected, but as usual, we'll interpret it on its own first. Okay, I'm going to continue putting these questions in here. 6, 7, 8, 9, and I think it's 9, and then we're up to 10. Oops. Okay. 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14. Okay. All right. It is now thinking time. My advice for thinking about this is pick translations and then work from there. But maybe that's not the right way to go about it. Okay, we already got a lot of ideas flowing. Okay, let's get them out here. Okay, let's go. Rachel, you're up.
Okay, first of all, I'm not sure this is like the authorial intent, but my
Okay.
mind immediately went to like when someone does something that's like slight and the other person just like keeps harping on about it. Like let's say they like mess up a word or something and the person's like,
Yeah.
oh, you said it wrong, you said it wrong. So I would translate it as like one who overlooks a small personal offense, seeks love in the good way, like seeks peace kind of. Um, but one who repeats about the transgression, so the dover is the offense to the friend or to other people, like ruins the friendship.
Okay. To the friend or to other people ruins the friendship. Okay. I think that is a good shot. So now um, uh, let's ask two questions. Is, um, one is, what is the subject? Okay. And like, in other words, such that these are two opposites. Okay. And then the second one is I want to understand a little bit better what makes this true. Okay. So if anyone has anything to weigh in on that, yeah, go ahead, Isaiah.
I mean, I think the subject is like, how do you treat this situation where someone has a misstep and you witness it?
Okay. So is how you respond to a misstep. And I like the word misstep here because we're not talking. I think this is kind of contingent on, like, I think we would not necessarily apply this to murder, right? I think that this is I think what Rachel is saying, like this is like a mistake might even be a better thing. Mistake. And this is another thing also is like in rabbinic Hebrew, pesha means like negligence. I never quite know when that connotation came in because I think pesha in other yeah, I mean, also in rabbinic Hebrew can also mean rebellion. So I'm not sure, if it's legit. Like Rachel started off, I'm not sure if this is authorial intent, but it definitely is a good idea here. Okay, so it's how you respond to a misstep, and then what makes this true? I feel like we intuitively sense it because we've experienced it.
Yeah, I would say just like anyone who is on the receiving end of that will automatically want to separate, like will not want to
Yeah, Right, but why is that? And I think that actually strengthens the question. In other words, like this. Let's say I if I were on the receiving end of this, I would want to push away my friend who's harping on it. But we know that there are cases where we know there are cases where person A would react by separating, but that same person A would harp on person B. So like what explains that inconsistency?
Wait, can you
Yeah, in
maybe
other words, like we all know people who do harp on things, but if you harp on their mistakes, then they'd be turned off. They'd be turned away.
so you're saying why do people have this cognitive dissonant
Yeah,
approach?
why the inconsistency? Now again, this could just be you could just answer simply by saying, well, people are inconsistent or people like value themselves more than their friend. But I want to go deeper and see if there's something in the actual you know.
I mean, I feel like when you're the one doing it, you just don't think it's such a big deal because you're like, it's just a small thing and it's just so funny, whatever. But then for the person on the receiving end, small things just feel a lot bigger because you're the one who's getting insulted.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, Isaiah. And then Ariel after that.
Yeah, I mean, not directly addressing like the contradiction that people might have, but like just how is this true? Like, I think like when you would like harp on a person's like small mistake that they make, especially in certain situations, like it might not represent like who they are as a person.
Right.
You're not really like seeing them. You're just seeing like something that like happened because of their like, just this happened to happen, and you clearly like aren't interested in paying attention to them as a person, but rather just like what the circumstance like, I don't know, like it seems like it comes from you, from like your ego, like why the reason that you're treating them like that, and
Mhm.
not from your empathy with them as a person.
Okay. All right. I think that's another part of the ingredients here. Yeah, Ariel?
Can I just build upon what Racheli and what Isaiah
Yeah,
just said?
sure.
I mean, maybe you can say like these two halves of the pasuk is kind of highlighting the person's framework and how he views the world from his perspective versus what he should be viewing the world. Meaning like if in the first half of the pasuk when he's like forgoing people's mistake, he's recognizing that there's like a greater reality other than himself where he takes things personally. If he takes things personally, he's viewing that the world revolves around him.
Hmm.
And when he's able to break out of that mindset, he's kind of like seeing the world as a like, no, okay, people make mistakes. Like I want to seek, an opportunity where we can all like love each other, like friends,
Yeah.
like, and I want them to give me the benefit of the doubt as well,
Yeah.
too. So that's like the first half of this. But when someone like constantly repeats, the something that someone did wrong, like he's kind of like worshiping that reality. He's kind of like you know like trapped in this mindset of like, this is my world, this is the world, and there's no such thing as like, the other person, being able to like make a mistake. It's like my world is revolved around, people, mistreating me this entire time.
Okay, I understand the first half better than the second half. So let me try to capture the first half in writing here. What you and Isaiah are saying. So someone who like embodies the first half recognizes that the world doesn't revolve around him and that people make mistakes without necessarily intending it as an attack on his person. Okay. And since he wants everyone to get along and is keeps his ego out of the picture, which allows him to empathize with this person, recognizing, I make mistakes like this also, and I don't necessarily, mean to attack. Then he's able to like, I guess continue strengthening. That's how you spell strengthening the relationship, despite that, initial hurt reaction. Okay, so that's like the first half. Okay, Second half, I feel like we need it to be a little bit clearer. I guess there's kind of two questions, and I don't know which one's more important. One is what stops him from putting himself in the other person's shoes and feeling what it's going to be like to be harped on like that. And the other question is what positively propels him to keep on bringing this thing up. And I don't know if it's the same answer for both.
Well, the answer to the first question is, I think it's pretty simple in
Is it
that
ego?
it's his ego.
Yeah, right.
Meaning like if he sees himself as, the center of the world, then, everything revolves around him, good and bad.
Will prevent him from letting go. Okay. And I think also maybe that could lead to, yeah, Avital Yotzi.
Yeah, there's also can be a misplaced sense of justice or fairness that this person wronged me, they didn't
Right,
apologize or anything like that, and I hold something against them.
right,
So, like a person can have a hard time keeping that in, and the way they express that is by telling other people, I feel hurt. This is
right.
hard for me. This person wronged me. And because they can't take a step back and, internalize the greater value of actually getting along, they see it in a more myopic sense, which leads them to not be able to get over it.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. So it is very usually put in terms of importance. It's very important for me to write this. Yeah, Ariel?
Right. And I think maybe to answer your second question is being a little bit more specific. Because I don't want to say it's just the ego, but I think that, if he has to acknowledge if he okay, if you just blame, like the other person or like constantly repeat, the davar that's bothering you,
Yeah,
then it's kind of like a security. It's like a security mechanism, like a safety measure for yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Because if it's not that, then you have to expose yourself to the reality that you might be the problem.
Hmm. Right.
It is an ego, but it's explaining why he's constantly doing this.
Okay. So additionally, there's a defense mechanism involved here. In other words, it's easier to harp on the other person than to ask yourself, why am I so bothered by this? Right? And what can I do to remove this suffering, right?
Go to
Like it's
therapy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, right, right. Uh, just another piece to throw into the puzzle, and then we'll go on to someone else's shot. I think, by the way, I think we're going to see some meforshim talking about this, so we're not leaving this, okay? But another thing that comes to my mind that I think is relevant, and I feel like we talked about this before, also is the fundamental attribution error. So Wikipedia says in social psychology, the fundamental attribution error is a cognitive attribution bias in which observers underemphasize situational and environmental factors for the behavior of an actor while overemphasizing dispositional or personality factors. In other words, observers tend to over-attribute the behaviors of others to their personality. For example, he is late because he's selfish, and under-attribute them to the situation or context. For example, he's late because he got stuck in traffic. Although personality traits and predispositions are considered to be observable facts in psychology, the fundamental attribution error is an error because it misinterprets their effects. Okay, so I feel like that's just a relevant thing to mention here, that like going back to my original question about why is it that why the hypocrisy, you know, this is not really answering the why, but this is just categorizing as a pattern here, is that we are very, very, when it comes to our own mistakes and our own offenses, we're very, very open to the idea that this is not really who I am, but like I was having a bad day, or like, I misinterpreted something, like attributing it to like the factors. But when someone else does it to us, we're like, oh, that's a petty, vengeful person, and like you define the person based on that. And again, that obviously stems from ego as well. It also stems from a lack of actually like wanting to harmonize. Okay, so just throwing that out there. Okay, let's go on to Alex, and we'll come back to this one. The meforshim take us there.
So I kind of conceptualized it more through the lens of like people pleasing, like the
Okay.
kind of people who would cover up either a social faux pas someone else has done, or perhaps like take on that role of mediator in relationships, constantly kind of like trying to, make things like more, I don't know the exact word, but like kind of, for lack of a better word, like covering up when things aren't perfect and trying to like move past it too easily, perhaps, for the sake of like people pleasing, shalom bias, however you want to
Yeah.
describe it. And the second half, for me at least, comes out like someone who repeats that same transgression and same pattern of behavior ultimately creates obstacles for like real intimacy and like
Oh,
growth.
okay. So it's talking someone who repeats that same error, which will create, I like the way you said that, create an obstacle to real, I'm just gonna say relationships to keep it broad here, relationships. And I'm keeping it broad that way because I think it actually could work the way you're saying it could work for the friend or for the ruler. Yeah. So let's just try to unify this a little bit more now. I really like this approach here, right? So these are both bad decisions, right? But are you taking it as these are two wrong ways to handle the same thing, or are you saying that these are two, I guess, wrong dynamics that could occur in the same scenario that could both lead to like shalom problems, or maybe those are the same thing?
I definitely think the second half, because it's one thing to be a people pleaser as a one-off for a
Yeah.
situational kind of conflict versus to have a pattern of behavior which consistently makes the same problems fester worse.
Hmm. Okay, just one second here. I just something I'm realizing I don't understand. Someone repeats that same error. So just to make sure I understand this, are you saying the person who repeats the concealment of the fault? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, right. Okay. So give me one second, or if anyone has anything to say, then you can share it. I'm just trying to process this. Again, I apologize, I'm a little slow tonight. Um, Hase Pesha Mavakesh Ahava. I'll ask you to be Machase that Pesha. Uh, okay. Okay, so I feel like people who, yeah, go ahead, Avital Yitzi.
Yeah, this is a slightly different version of the same idea that
Sure.
I had in mind, but I think the first part of the pasuk can be a positive, meaning someone wrongs you and you're willing to let it slide, and that's a good thing. You don't need to go at their throat right away. But as Alex was saying, if that's repeat behavior, then there's
Hmm.
going to be resentment that builds, and you might think that what you're still doing, or really in your mind, what you're still doing is being mivakesh ahava, but in reality,
Okay,
because
right.
you're not you're totally averse to confrontation. In reality, what you're doing is being mafrid aloof. You're separating like a really good friend, even though that's totally not what you're meaning to do.
Okay, good. I like that. In the relationship dynamic due to one person not being aware of the effects that their offenses are having, and the people pleaser not being not I guess not honestly, disclosing those effects. Okay. Yeah, Racheli?
Also, I feel like for Alex's approach, then you would read it as like the vav is an and symbol, no? Like
Yeah,
that,
correct. Right, which does definitely work, but you're right. You'd have to say and.
because you would
Yeah,
say like this is something, and one who does this multiple
right.
times does, yeah, okay.
Correct. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think the reason why I like Yitzi's better right now, which I'm not saying that it's possible that we can still bring Alex's around. I like Yitzi's because it is showing two opposites um in an emotion where you have like an emotion is good. What I'm reminded of here is the head designer of Mark Rosewater, head designer of Magic the Gathering, Rosewater's statement about like that in hero, superhero, and supervillain comics that the what was his statement? Hold on, I gotta get it here. Mark Rosewater, superhero, uh, theory, theory. It's possibly he was quoting someone. Superpower. Oh, hold on. Nope. Superpower. Oh man, I'm just not remembering my things. Okay, something about like like the superhero's greatest weakness is his greatest strength pushed too far or something like that. In other words, you can have a thing which is a virtue, in this case, being willing to overlook offenses, but if you take that quantitatively too far, it becomes the problem that you're trying to avoid, and that's a very Mishleic, like the reason why I like this is a very Mishleic thing, and like Ray Moskowitz always says that he says the emotions don't distinguish between quantities. Okay. And the example he used to give is that it is much easier for people to get a speeding ticket than to run a red light, because a red light is a qualitative change. Either the light is yellow or it's red, but speeding is a quantitative thing, and it's very easy to end up gradually speeding and not realize it, because the emotions are like, well, I'm going fast or I'm going slow. Like so same thing here is like you can think that you are doing something that helps the relationship by overlooking faults, but the resentment builds and builds and builds. And before you know it, you are an obstacle to the relationship, because what is the other guy supposed to do? They don't know what that they're doing anything wrong, So I think that's a really nice idea. So now let's just circle back to Alex's. Is Alex's way of reading the second half bringing out a second idea? Like, is that a variant in this idea? Because I feel like there's potential for that. Racheli?
I just want to comment, like, it says seeks love, which I think it doesn't say finds love. Like, I feel like
Right.
if it was an only idea endearing um trait or thing to do, then it would
Yeah.
say one who does this finds it. But here it seems to be saying that the one who covers up a mistake or whatever is looking for it, which can be read negatively, I
I
think.
see what you're saying. Yeah, right, right. That's a good nuance. I'm also realizing that you could. No, never mind. That didn't work. Yeah, Alex.
For me, at least, I think the first half can be positive or negative depending situationally on like what's actually happening,
Yeah,
whereas the second half comes into when it becomes a character trait. Because like being agreeable and people pleasing can be good in the right context,
right,
but if someone is genuinely not a good person and they're like a Russia, for instance, like you
right,
need to call out negative behaviors or else you're perpetuating and enabling a cycle.
right. Is deliberately worded to be good or bad. Okay, that's good. All right, I think I like this cluster, this not cluster of ideas, but this general like take on the pasuk. And I think this is good enough for our purposes for this moment here. Okay, let's go to Ariel. Oh, sorry, wait. I'll be telling you if he has one more thing to say.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. One more thing is the way you said the idea is that it's a difference in quantities,
Yeah,
meaning I'm like that's also the way that I was saying it, but under Alex's approach, it can also be a difference in what a person's motivation for doing it is. Meaning if someone's a people pleaser and that's their reason for doing it, then that's a
right.
negative thing. But if
Okay, that's a good
somebody
point.
does have a backbone, but the reason why they're being mechasa peshas just for the sake of friendship, not because they don't have the guts or whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
to actually confront. So that can make the difference as well.
Okay, that's good. From a, I'm gonna throw in a word that no one is using here, but I'm gonna say like a neurotic, people pleasing, tendency, um, versus a, I don't want to say like, I don't want to say calculated. That makes it sound Machiavellian, but like, I don't know, like an intentionally thought out, you know, um, you know, Rodef Shalom, type approach to cultivating and mending relationships, something like that. In other words,
I,
like it's an intentional
yeah,
decision.
I was thinking it's actually a little different. Some people are just conflict averse, where it's not
Yeah,
even an intentional thing that what I'm trying to do is be so friendly, but it's just hard for some people to actually confront someone when they feel wronged.
right. That's what I'm
Then
calling
they can,
neurotically people pleasing.
right, and then they can
Yeah,
justify it with, oh, I'm just being peaceful. I don't know if
right.
that's the
Exactly.
same way.
Yeah. All right, that's good. All right, Ariel, you're up.
All right, I have a different reading of the pasuk in
Oops.
that I think that the person who is covering up the pasha is the transgressor himself.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
um, so I want to say that that I think you have like two different types of people. One person is someone who kind of like he does an offense, he through he made a mistake. One type of person is where like, okay, like look, he recognizes the mistake and he fixes it. He's quiet about it, and he improves on it, and he doesn't dwell on it. I think that's what it means to cover up. Versus he doesn't justify himself for doing the mistake, right? And I think that going into the second half of the pasuk, I think the individual who constantly talks about it, like he repeats it, and he just I think he's just justifying his actions, and kind of doubling down on his mistake.
Mhm.
I think that kind of alienates himself from his friends because it's people will see through that.
Okay, so the second person is one who does make a big deal about them. Now you're saying he's justifying them. Is
Yeah,
that an example or is that the essence?
I'm saying I am defining Shona Badavar as someone who is when he is constantly bringing it up, that's just him
Okay,
justifying it.
who constantly brings it up as a way of justifying it.
Yeah,
And
and he
then
could do it in different ways, like
yeah,
whatever.
and then what's the mafri aloof? You're saying that's going to alienate people?
Yeah, well, people will find that annoying, and people will see through that, and like, okay, I don't want to hang out with you anymore.
Okay, so I'm saying people and that will alienate people. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and suggest something here. I don't know if this is shot, but there are meforshim, including we're gonna see Metzudas David. Okay, translates aloof as um uh as aloof with a capital A, which is God. Would that be a better translation for you rather than making because I feel like the way that I'm seeing the way that you built up to the idea up until the end seems to be about how a person deals with their own faults. So it feels like kind of like a curveball. Why are we suddenly talking about his friends? Whereas let's say according to Alex and Yitzi and Racheli, like the subject is about friendships. Whereas according to you, it sounds more like how you deal with your own faults. That's why I feel like
Right.
maybe
So I think capital A would. Yeah. I was just saying friends because I wasn't learning aloof as in like
yeah,
God.
no,
It's like
right, but it
it
works
didn't
out though,
lend
right?
itself to. Yeah, but I think it is better. Yeah.
Be driving away
Yeah,
Hashem.
because he's
Okay, so
focusing on his own perfection.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just develop this a little bit here. Can we say how, like, what exactly is happening? Okay, meaning what?
I
How is
think
it?
Racheli wants to
Yeah, okay,
hop
go
on
ahead.
her.
Yeah.
Hi. I feel like it makes more sense to say that he actually repeats the thing, no? Like not constantly repeats about it, but just continues.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think you could read it that way, but I think what Ariel is doing is he's saying that like this is a much more localized opposite, that you conceal the thing or you go to the opposite of concealing, which is like talking about it a
Uh-huh.
lot, you know?
Because,
Um,
okay,
yeah.
I guess if you think about covering up the mistake kind of as not viewing it as essential to yourself,
Mm,
that's like another
yeah.
way.
I want to remind us of something else also here, just as a reminder. The word or the root of chaf pei resh lechaper, like kapara,
To
means
atone
three
or
things. Say again?
like to atone.
Yeah, but it has three meanings. Either it means to cover, to repay, or to remove. Okay, so when we use atone, we use it to remove sins, or when you say like a don't, there's also to give a kofar for for a murderer, meaning to like give like a payment to like substitute for them. And then we say, for example, kofar is to cover like like Yocheved covers Moshe's thing in pitch,
That's
or like the ark, Noah's ark, is covered in
isn't
kofar.
a kofar like a denier?
That's in rabbinic Hebrew, not in biblical
Okay.
Hebrew, I believe. Yeah. So the reason I'm bringing it up is there are people who say that the word kapara, like to atone, does not come from remove, like God removing it from your record or you removing it from yourself, but like God is like overlooking your things. So I'm just bringing this up because you could read machase pesha as the emphasis being on not making a big deal about them or on fixing them. So if you say it's not making a big deal on it, then the cleaner opposite is making a big deal about it, like Ariel said. But if machase pesha, if the essence is fixing it, then maybe the more direct opposite is repeating it, like you said.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think both work, but yeah. And the reason why this intrigues me is because obviously, if you repeat a sin, then you're alienating God. But the chiddush, the new insight is going to come from talking about the thing. And I'll tell you what this reminds me of also. In Hilchos Tshuva, this reminds you of a halacha in Hilchos Tshuva. Anyone know what I'm going to talk about? I don't know if this is going to be relevant, but thinking about it. So here is a halacha in chapter 2. Halacha. No, it's chapter 1. No, it can't be chapter 1. It must be chapter 2. Hold on. Yeah, chapter 2, halacha hey. The shevach gadol lashav. So it is a great praiseworthy thing for a shav, someone who did teshuva. She is vade barabim, to confess publicly, viodia pisha'av lahem, and to make known his transgressions to them. Umagala averos shebeno lebein chaver la'acherin, and to reveal the sins, interpersonal sins, to others. V'omer lahem, and to say to them, amnam chatasi leploni v'asisi lo kach, and to say, excuse me, I sinned against so and so, and I've done such and such. V'harini hayom shav v'nicham, and today I have done tshuva and I regret what I did. Anyone who is haughty and does not divulge his interpersonal sins, but he conceals his sins. His teshuva is not complete. Shneimar, as it says in Mishlei, one who conceals his sins will not succeed. Okay, now, when is that talking about? Everything we just said, that's only talking about interpersonal sins. About but sins between you and God, you don't need to publicize them. And that means that it's not like earlier you said your teshuva is incomplete if you don't publicize it. Here, it's not like your teshuva requires you to publicize it. But not only that, va'azus panim hilo im gilam. It is considered brazen or chutzpah, audacious to reveal your sins between man and God. Ella, shav lifnei hakel baruchu. You should do teshuva between you and God. Uporet chata'av lefanav, and specify your sins in front of Him. Umizvad elem bifnei rabim stam, and confess about them publicly in a non-specific manner. V'tova hilo shelo nisgal avono, and it's better to not reveal his sin between him and God. Shneimar ashri nisui pesha ksui chata'a. As it says, praiseworthy are those who. I forgot how to translate this here. Nisui pesha ksui chata'a. Yeah, I forgot what the nisui pesha is. Let me just look here. Imanovetsky, please save us. Fortunate is the one whose crime is forgiven. Okay, he's using it as like no se alvin vafesha, and whose sin is covered over. Yeah. Okay, so in other words, so this is possibly relevant. Hold on a second. Possibly relevant. Cannot type tonight. Possibly relevant. Hilchos Teshuva 2:5, in which the Rambam says that it is a bad thing to publicize your sins between you and God. Rather, you should just do teshuva privately. Okay, and look, without going into the full analysis of the halacha, you can see why doing teshuva publicly for bein adam l'chavero is a good thing, because number one, first and foremost, that helps them, the person who you wronged, to feel like they were, the injustice is being recognized and publicly apologized for, and it also promotes like an opening for other people to, I don't know, to like spread the love of bein adam l'chavero, like teshuva, but when you're publicizing sins between you and God, there is a certain like on the one hand, yeah, it's good that you're admitting that you sinned, but there's also a certain like disrespect to God that you're like, it's making public the fact that this is something that like sinning against God is something that people do, which we all know, but like it diminishes the kavod of the king in a certain way. So I don't know if that's relevant here, but since we're talking about Hashem, then maybe it's relevant. So I still don't feel like we've answered this question. How is repeating this sin, whether you say it is a sin between you and God. Actually, you know what? Okay, hold on a second. I think we have to translate this differently, okay? Um, if we're gonna go all in on this, Ariel, one who conceals his sins between himself and God, sorry, his his sins against God, okay, seeks God's love. Okay. I think let's try that out. But one who repeats, um, yeah, I guess repeatedly talks about his sins um, between himself and God, alienates him as a friend or as a loved one, let's say. I think that's like the best way to translate it according to this.
I mean, doesn't it
Okay.
also show like a lack of humility or shame?
Yeah, there's definitely a shamelessness there. That's yeah. I think that's like part of the brazenness, right? So how's that going to be an obstacle between you and God? I think that's a good step.
Well, I mean, if you have no shame, then you're kind of making it your reality. Like this is a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Yes.
like appropriate.
Okay, so I think this actually ties to an idea that we did on Yom Kippur night when we were talking about the vidui and how we did a thing that um we did a midrash that says that as soon as Klal Yisrael said Chatanu, then God forgave them, and then we said like, what's the whole? That can't be like you obviously have to do tshuva. Um, so I think what we said there is that um that the essence of teshuva all right, sorry, let me do this in transliterated words. The essence of teshuva, uh, you know, between you and God is is humbling yourself and recognizing the supremacy of his framework. Okay. So if your teshuva involves a degree of brazenness, ego, you know, I guess like, making it all about yourself, then that will be an obstacle to the core of teshuva. I want to see an example of what this would be like. I think that would help us to understand it. Anyone has an example? Isaiah, do you have another idea or you have a comment on this? I didn't see if
I
you
have
had to.
another idea.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone have an example of how someone who is like, what would be an example? I need something that like rings true here that a person is, making, I mean, this is painting with a broad brush, but I feel like, Christians, I don't know if this is too big of an example, but like, I feel like, let me think about it for 1 second here. No, and maybe I'm painting with two. Yeah. Avital Yetzi?
Yeah, one thing that I think might be relevant is sometimes there'll be people who talk back about the years when they were teenagers or like in that stage of life, and
Yeah.
well, let's say they won't be doing the stuff that they did back then, but they'll still talk about it in a way where like they kind of maybe saying it, oh yeah, this is something I shouldn't have done, but you can tell that they're still kind of looking for people to view them a certain way because they did it or to get some street
Okay.
credit
Right. That's a good example.
based on that.
Right, so who confesses the sinful their sinful past, but you can sense that they get a certain satisfaction out of publicly reminiscing uh about it and having people view them that way.
Right.
And
And it's not like Baal Tshuva in like the classical sense, but just anybody who matured, you know?
yeah, right, right. I mean, yeah. Um say, or someone who had an immature youth view them that way, and that is I keep on coming back to this term. That's a blemish to the honor of Hashem. Yeah, Rachel, you had your party symbol.
Yeah. Um, I feel like I don't know if this is where you were going when you said Christians, but I feel like I was just talking to someone about this that like the kind of essence, I mean the emphasis on like um kind of God absolving you of all your sins, and like it doesn't even really have to do with you. In a way, that's kind of egotistical because you're saying like I I just get it for free kind of, and it can be an obstacle to like doing your own
Uh-huh.
internal work.
That's another example than the one I was going. I was going more on the opposite fact of like the Christians talking about how like we're inherently sinners, you know?
Uh,
And I feel like there is a certain, and maybe it leads to the same point that there's a certain like reveling in that.
yeah,
Like if you're an inherent sinner, then like
you could do
that
without
does
it,
kind of absolve
whatever.
you about all that stuff. And if you combine that with Jesus just giving you
Yeah.
parts for free, then like it's a win-win situation for that ego. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think this is good. Let's put this on the side burner also
Oh
because
wait, can I ask a quick question? With what you mentioned about Hilchos Tshuva, I never heard that halacha about like publicizing your Ben Adam L'Chaver sins, and I know you don't want to go into like the whole thing, but I'm just curious like what that means in a practical sense. Like you go to a public square and say like,
So here, the example that I'll give you an example of a good thing to do and a bad thing to do. Okay, bad thing to do is if the sin that you sin against the other person involves, if publicizing it is going to involve shaming them, then obviously don't do it, right? Like if you speak lashon hara about someone, don't go and say, "Hey, I said," and then you blab for the whole thing about the other person. But the example that comes up with me is that look, every teacher who is involved in disciplining a class will occasionally make a mistake, like calling out a kid for talking when they really weren't talking. And I think it's very important that A, I own up to that mistake, and B, that I apologize publicly to the student in front of the same class that I did this in front of. Because if he gets wronged in public and then I apologize to him privately, okay, so fine, that's like, that does, that's partial restitution, but that like he still got, shamed in public, and like I'm not taking ownership for it in public in the same way that I sinned in public. So like saying like I just wanted to apologize in front of the class that I, said that so and so was talking out of turn and he really was just trying to help someone, something like that. So that's an example. Okay, Isaiah, you're up, and then let's go to meforshim.
Could you pull the pasuk back up? Yeah. So
Where are we going? Hold on, there we go.
yeah. So the way I was thinking about this is like maybe it's two. Both of these halves are talking about negative consequences. So in the first half is where someone who knows about someone's like transgression that they did, and has to cover it up. It could be theirs. It could be their own transgression or someone else's transgression.
Okay.
It's kind of forced into a position where they have to be mivakesh ava, sort of in order to cover up the transgression. Like I would say, like in a case where you have to sort of like smooth things over with people so they don't realize that like something's been done, or like make things nice between people in like in a way where you're trying to keep it covered that like something bad was done.
Right.
Like so withholding information puts you in a position like that. But on the other hand, if you're go and you like spout the information that you know about someone else, so you tend to alienate people, which I think we've sort of already covered. So I think what the pasuk is teaching is that the right path is like somewhere in the middle. Like when you know about someone's transgressions, it's maybe not going to put you in the best position to like have to cover it up, but it's also not going to be a smart idea to freely share. So I think the best path is to what's the word? Reveal things in a discerning way.
Okay. You should reveal things in a discerning way. Do you have a category or an example of that? Because I think you're right on the cusp of saying what at least some of the meforshim say. Let's work with an example.
I'm just thinking of like where you have someone where you know someone's secret and like they wouldn't necessarily want you to share. Well, let's say
Let's use an example. Let's use an example.
I have a real example. It's like, so let's say you know something about someone in business where it's like if someone was if you were asked about this person in business, like if you were to go sharing this information, then it would make you look like you're just trying to take them down for no reason.
Yeah.
Or if you were to try to like never mention it, then you'd have to like lie basically.
Right.
But to like share the information, when specifically asked about it, is probably like the right approach to take.
Okay, so I have a better example for the middle path here. Okay, so you see your friend cheat on a test. Okay, so one bad decision is to blab. I'm gonna go in order of the puzzle. Is to conceal it. Okay, in an effort to seek his love. Okay, or his friendship, I guess, right? To like maintain the friendship and not rock the not risk jeopardizing it. Okay, another bad decision is to indiscriminately blab about it. Okay, what should you do? I think this is setting up. So what should you do? That's neither of those. Give tochacha, rebuke. Okay, that is revealing your knowledge of it in a productive way that is actually good for your friend and ultimately good for the friendship. Okay, because your friendship, because you're doing it out of care. So I don't know if that's the only middle path, but I think that is a very, very common middle path in the scenario you're describing. Unless you disagree with me.
Yeah, no, I like that. That
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay, that's good. Okay, let's go to some meforshim here, and we'll see what we find. So the first one is Metzudas David, who does take the Ariel reading. We'll see if it's the same Ariel idea. So Machase im yachata ish leish. Okay, so already we're on a different thing than what I was saying. If one person sins against another, who machase al psha'av v'lo kirim, and he, we'll have to see who this is, covers up his transgressions and doesn't mention them. Hine bezeh mevakesh ava. Through this, he is seeking love. Ratzalomar, i.e., he sibas lios misahav al brios. This will cause him to be loved by people. So I think this is he, i.e., the victim. Right? I think the victim covers up the transgressions and doesn't mention them. Like, and this is what we're saying. Like, you're willing to overlook, personal, when someone wrongs you. Okay. Vishone bedavar, but one who repeats the matter. Okay. Hamasapir hapesha, one who tells of the transgression. Vishone ba, and repeats it. Lasapra shenis, to tell it again. Leval yishkachena, so as not to, I'm going to say, let it be forgotten. Okay, I know that might not be grammatically correct. Mafrid me'atzmo alufo shel olam, separates, or I guess alienates from himself, the friend of the universe. That's God, by the way, in case you were wondering. Ki yavor al lositor, for he transgresses, do not bear a grudge. Okay, so let's really quickly go over the halachos of grudge bearing here. So this is in Hilchos Deos 2:7. So this is the classic case. Hanokim es chavero. So first we have to do revenge. Someone who takes revenge against his fellow over below violates a negative prohibition. Shnemar, it says lo sikom, don't take revenge. The alpha pisha eno loka, even though you don't get lashes. Da'as ra hi admod. It is a very bad mentality. Okay, Ella, rather, roy la'adam lios mavir al kol divrei ha'olam. It is proper for a person to forego all worldly matters, or to overlook all worldly matters. Shahakol etel hamavinim divrei hevel v'havai. And because to those who understand, all these things are transient and matters of transience, and I have a good translation of havai. Havai means like exaggeration or hyperbole, but in this context, it means like blown out of proportion or fantasy or yeah, I don't know. I had a good translation for this. The enam kedai lin kamalim, and they're not worth taking revenge over. Okay, so that's an example of not taking revenge, and then bearing a grudge is very similar. Ketzat anakima. What is sorry, I just read that. Wait. Oh, sorry. I didn't read that yet. I imagine that I read it. Okay. What is a case of taking revenge? Amar lo chavero, your friend says to you, Hashi'ilini kardomecha, lend me your axe. Amar lo eini mashilcha, I'm not going to lend. You say to him, I'm not going to lend it to you. Lamachar, the next day, tzarach lishol mimenu. Next day, you need to ask him for something. Amar lo, so you say to him, Hashi'ilini kardomecha, lend me your axe. Amar lo, and he says to you, eini mashilcha k'derech lo hishaltani kishishalti mimecha. I'm not going to lend you my axe just the way that you didn't lend me your axe when I asked you. Harzenokim, that's taking revenge. Ella kishiyavalo lishol, rather when he comes to ask, yitin b'leiv shalim, he should give it with a full heart, v'lo yigmolo kasher gmolo, and he should not do back to him what he did to him. Same thing with all these things. Amar David b'de'osav hatovos im gamalti sholmi ra ve'achaltza tzorari reikam. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. Pasuk. V'chein kol anoter lechem Yisrael over belosa. Say same thing if you hold a grudge against someone. Shneimar, as it says, v'lositor es b'nei amecha. Don't hold a grudge against a member of your people. Ketzad, how so? Reuven shamar l'Shimon. If Reuven says to Shimon, sechor li baizeh, rent me your house or this house. O hashileni shorzeh, or lend me this ox. V'lo rata Shimon, and Shimon doesn't want to. Liyamim, days later, tzarach Shimon l'Reuven lishol mimeno lischor. Days later, Shimon needs to rent or borrow something from Reuven, Omer lo Reuven, and Reuven says to him, "Hey, La, here you go. Harini mashilcha ve'ini kamoscha. I'm lending to you, and I'm not like you. I'm not paying you back the way you doing what you did to me. Someone who does this violates bearing a grudge. Okay, and then he says what you should do. You should erase the matter from your heart and not bear a grudge. As long as you hold on to this grudge, v'zochro, and you recall it, shema yavolinko, maybe you'll come to take revenge. So this is one of the cases where the Torah, Torah prohibition is offense against another Torah prohibition. Really, the Torah does not want you to take revenge, and it prohibits bearing a grudge because bearing a grudge will lead to taking revenge. Lefikach hikpida Torah on natira. That's why the Torah is so strict with bearing a grudge. To the point where you erase the iniquity from your heart and don't recall it at all. And it doesn't mean you don't recall it mentally. It means you don't like bring it up. And this is a proper character trait that makes it possible to establish society on earth and and dealings with between people. Okay, so this is different than Ariel, even though he's using the same translation here. So just summary is when someone sins against you and you forgive them. Okay, I think that's what it means when he says you cover it up and you don't mention it. Okay, that will be a cause of making you beloved. Okay, but if you not only don't overlook it, but you constantly bring it up. Okay, so I think we have to insert here, okay, in brackets, not only will you be less loved by people, especially the person who sinned against you, but you will also drive away God as a friend. So the question is, what's the main idea, right? This is a funny thing because if this just kept it, like, I think this could have worked out that you just learn this as between you and another person, and that friend is literal, and we'll be talking about two ways, like we've said before, like two ways to react when someone wrongs you, so why bring in God, and how does that, why bring in God, and then what does it mean that you're driving him away? Yeah, Racheli?
So maybe like by doing so, you're exhibiting a lack of compassion and forgiveness, which is like a godly
Okay,
trait.
good. Okay, so
Yeah.
when God, we are commanded, to walk in God's ways, which means to emulate his actions and midos, right? And again, midos are not traits, because God is one and has no qualities. Okay, but his modes of action. And this is like, again, in the Mishnah and Avos, arba midos nosne tzedakah. There are 4 modes of action in people who give tzedakah. Arba midos, talmidim, etc. So one of those midos is that God is forgiving. Okay, we say that no say avon chata v'nakeh, that he bears or he forgives all these types of unintentional, say avon, intentional sins, rebellious sins, unintentional sins, and he cleans them, right? Okay, so God relates with his hashgacha to those who, I know I spelled that wrong, who emulate his ways. And if you don't practice forgiveness, then you will not be someone to whom God relates in a friendly, and that's like hashgachic way. Okay, I think that's a good straightforward shot here. Yeah. Okay, anyone have a different idea or a deeper analysis of this? Because I think this is consistent with what the Torah teaches. The only question is Mishlei teaching you an additional insight into God's hashgacha, or is it just taking God's hashgacha as a given, as like just a dynamic of how the world works, and then saying like, by the way, you think that you're going to be on God's, you're going to be on the receiving end of God's hashgacha if you are unforgiving towards other people. I got news for you, you're not. Let's just think and see if we can understand this on a deeper level. I'm going to put this as a question here. Hold on, where do we go here? Question is, can we understand this idea of hashgacha on a deeper level? Yeah, Racheli?
I don't really know if this is the direction you mean, but maybe it's also about what kind of person you become in a
Yeah, that is exactly the direction I was going to go in.
okay.
Yeah.
So you could elaborate, but
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So I'm not going to call this an answer. I'm going to call it a step, which is that hashgacha, uh, hashgacha isn't magic. Okay. Rather, a certain, you know, the good you receive from Hashem, okay, the way he designed the world, will depend on how you engage the world. And that will depend on what kind of person you are. Okay. So something about an unforgiving person makes you this is the wrong word, but immune. Immune makes it sound like hashgacha is bad, so I don't want to use that word. Makes you and I don't want to use unreceptive. And I don't want to say not eligible. I'm trying to get away from this idea that it's like I'm not saying like if you're nice, then like if you're nice to your sibling, then God, if you're nice to your sibling, then your parents will take you to Disneyland also. It's not like a ticket to being eligible. I'm trying to say that you are not, and I don't want to say not worthy, even though that's true. Just give me 1 second. I'll say you makes you not the type of person capable of even receiving the hashgacha. Okay. And then now the question is how? Yeah, I see what you're typing. Separated, disconnected. Is not exact. I mean, it's true, but that's not exactly what the vibe I'm going for here. I want to think of an example. If we can get an example, then we'll illustrate it here. Let's see here.
I have an example.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I just did this today. In the story with Shimon ben Gera.
Yeah.
Where he was throwing stones at David HaMelech in his camp, and he started cursing David HaMelech. And then Avishai was like, "Who is this dead dog? We got to kill him. He can't be cursing at the Melech." And then David HaMelech was like, "What's with you, children of Ben Syria, whatever? It's probably God giving him the hashgacha." I mean, this nevuah to tell me this, but this is where it gets interesting. Relevant to here is that look, I'm gonna let him live, and it's possible Hashem will see me letting him live, and he'll find favor in my eyes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he's giving him like that mercy to live.
Right. Yeah, but what I'm trying to understand, that is a good example. What I'm trying to understand though is how does that make you into a different person who now the hashgacha relates to? I want like a concrete example of how that works. It's possible this is beyond the scope of my ability to think tonight, given my compromised mental acuity right now. So let's just leave this here, okay? And we could always discuss it in the after party chat if we want to. Let's go on to one more. Maybe I've one in me one more. Let's do Rabbeinu Yonah. I did not vet this translation here, so I'm going to go ahead and read it in Hebrew and translate. Ha'ish asher yavakish liknos ahuvim v're'im. Someone who wants to acquire friends and companions. Yachase pesha'e chavero. He should cover up the offenses of his friend. So far this looks like it's going on Alex and Yeti's route. V'yavir amidosav. And overlook their bad midos, or unless that's being mavir al midosav, his own midos, meaning overlook his own things that happened to him. Va'az yarbu ahuvav ohavav re'av. Then he'll increase his loved ones. Okay. Oh, so I forgot something. Rabbeinu Yonah does this weird thing where he defines his terms at the end of the commentary. So let's just look there first. Inyan aluf ohev neman ubabris. Okay, I don't think covenant partner is good. A faithful and trustworthy friend. Okay, so aluf that's what he's saying aluf means, is not just any friend, but a trustworthy friend. And the meaning of mechase pesha is that he covers even the sins of action. Okay, meaning not just bad midos, but he will even overlook sins of action. So someone who harps on things even though he wasn't harmed by them. Okay, so like there are people who, like, if you do something that like could have harmed them, they'll freak out, and then there are people who'll be like, oh, it's okay, no harm was done. So Yeshona B'davar is the opposite of no harm was done. They're like, how could you have done that? We could have gotten killed or whatever. I mean, maybe that's a different story. Okay, going back to now Rabbeinu Yonah. So if you want to acquire friends, how to win friends and influence people, you should overlook their faults even when they are presumably when they do something against you. Okay, V'shona B'davar, kapdan, a demanding, exacting person. ChatGPT is punctilious. Gam al divrei chavero, someone who's makpid even on the matters of his friend. Im lo shakal hadavar l'rtzono l'chvodo v'yishana b'davar ahu v'yomer kazeh v'kazeh dibarta l'hashimo al davar l'halin alav. So, in other words, you are, even if the person is not doing something that's befitting of your honor, okay, and you'll say, oh, you spoke to me like such and such, funny reference. That's funny. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Such a person, where did I lose my place here? Mafrid mimenu aluf, he will separate from himself, he will alienate even an aluf, even a good friend. And you will not find, and all the more so you won't find regular friends with this midah. There's no person who doesn't make mistakes. No one's vigilance, no one's intellectual grasp or vigilance is so complete so as to lishkol kol devar, to weigh all of his matters. No one has constant vigilance. V'achrei asher yakpid al divrei chaverav lo yishku behem mishuras kavodo uritzono lo timashech imo chavras rea v'avas chaver. I kind of lost the English there, but I'm just going to cheat and read the English here. Consequently, if he's exacting about his fellows' words when they err with respect to honor or wishes, companionship or friendship of love will not continue with him. Okay, so let's summarize here. Basically, I think this is close to. Wait, is this close to what Alex? No, that's not what Alex was saying. I guess got misled. I forget. I'm almost ready to stop. Where are we? Okay, so summary is. Okay, this is talking about someone who is. This is talking about how to win or lose friends. Okay, so if you overlook the personal offenses of your friends, or I guess of people around you, of others, you will be loved by them. Okay. But if you are a kapdan, okay, someone who is constantly harping on people's mistakes, okay, even when no actual harm came to you, even if they just didn't treat you the way you felt you ought to have been treated, then not only will you not gain friends, but you might even lose your best friends. Okay. So now the question is, what's the main idea? Okay, I think we intuitively sense that this is true because we've been around people like this. But what's the idea? And again, I want to say, like, you know, what is the main idea and why emphasize, even a faithful and trustworthy friend? And apparently that includes even someone, let's say you have a friend, let's say the two people in the two halves of the pasuk are friends, right? It seems like the person in the second half is going to even drive away the person in the first half. What's the idea? And see, this is where this extra step matters. It's not just like, well, Mishlei is teaching you that annoying people are annoying. Like, it's not just that. There has to be some deeper idea here, I think. Yeah, Raquel?
Like a faithful friend is someone who sticks around even when you're kind of annoying. So this is, or just like when you're not necessarily being the best friend, but they just, stick around. So in this case, you are even alienating them, which is very extreme, I guess.
Right. Yeah, but I want to understand why. I understand why he's mentioning it, but why does that happen? Or what is he telling us about why that happens, I guess?
Give me a
Yeah.
second.
Or what mistake is this guy making, That's another clue question. What mistake is this guy making, thinking that this won't lose him friends or might even win him friends? I mean, just to repeat a trend we picked up earlier here, okay, but just now this is through the lens of friendship, okay, is at its root, this guy, relates to friendship, I guess views friendship as being all about him, okay, and his feelings and his ego, and his standards, okay, and I think people only. I don't want to tip my hand here because some of you are going to be in my women's shiur on Thursday, and that's about friendship this week. So I don't want to reveal too much. Yeah, Ariel?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that in itself is the answer. Like the reality is, like, if he's always focused on himself,
Yeah.
at a certain point, like, your friend is also human. Your friend also has his own things that he has to deal with, and like, if you don't cater to his ego too, and if it's just about yourself, eventually, like, okay, look, at a certain point, it's like enough is enough. Like, I don't need to surround myself with people like that.
Yeah. Okay, so egotistical person. Yeah, it reminds me of that midrash about Hashem, and Hashem says to the Baal Gaiva, to the person who's haughty, there's not enough room in this universe for him and for me. In other words, like there's only enough room in this universe for one God. Okay, and if you think that you're a God, then like you can't, you can't have a relationship with Hashem. So I think the same thing with an actual relationship with a person is that you need to be able to identify with the other person and empathize with them, and cater to them, in a sense. So if you can't do that, then friendships aren't possible. And this reminds me of an idea Rami Moskowitz said about why celebrity marriages are always doomed to fail. And by celebrity marriages, he's saying when two celebrities marry each other, is that they're always doomed to fail because they have such big egos that there's going to need to be one of them that's a winner, and they're not going to take being a loser for an answer. Their egos are too big, so it cannot work, even if it works for years, Okay, I apologize again. Having only gotten 4 hours of sleep, I am just totally done tonight. I'm not even going to review. There's a lot more here. I wish we could do this more, but I think we got good ideas tonight. Have a good night. Thanks for coming, and hopefully talk to you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a good night.